It's tough to fight back against terrorist groups. By nature, they blend in amongst civilian communities. They hide like cowards until they pounce on the vulnerable. They're not like regular armies who fight under government authority and within norms of conduct. And of course, terrorists often commit suicide in their attacks, but someone's got to organize it all. Someone's got to finance it, recruit it, communicate it, spread it. And sometimes that someone is a recognized government, like Libya, which under Muammar Gaddafi sponsored many terrorist attacks around the world, including the terrible bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, that killed 170. Nearly 2 decades later, though, the government of Libya paid billions of dollars to the victims of that terrorism in a settlement. It's a political decision by Libya to move from being a rogue state to a more respectable member of the world community. But there are other terrorist-sponsoring states that are not interested in mending their ways, like Iran, which has been listed as a state sponsor of terrorism by Canada for years, and obviously in the US and other countries too. Well, Iran supported a terrorist group called Hamas that bombed a university in Israel back in 2002 that killed a US student studying there. The student was Marla Bennett. Hamas planted a bomb in the student cafeteria. It killed 9 students, including Marla. So her family filed a lawsuit in the United States for wrongful death. They sued Iran and the Iranian Ministry of Information and Security. They proved Iran, quote, provided persistent support to Hamas on a standard of clear and convincing evidence. So a U.S. judge back in 2007 found in Marla's favor and awarded damages of nearly $13 million to the family against Iran. Well, Iran tried to hide its assets and claim state immunity. That's the thing about governments that support terrorism. Governments have the protections that we grant to real countries out of diplomatic respect. But Iran used it to operate as killers. It wouldn't surprise me if one day a Hamas murderer shoots someone in the forehead, and when he's arrested by police, he whips out his diplomatic passport, says he works for the embassy, and claims diplomatic immunity. Really, that's exactly what they do now, just without the drama. So Marla's family took steps to enforce that U.S. judgment here in Canada, to seize Iranian assets here, to make good on that debt from a U.S. court. And a Canadian judge agreed and referred to specific real estate holdings by Iran in Canada. So it's been 14 years. Marla is still dead. I'm pretty sure this isn't about the money for the family. I think it's about anyone holding the Iranian terrorists accountable, because the United Nations sure aren't, and Barack Obama sure isn't. He actually signed a deal letting Iran continue their nuclear program and paying them billions of dollars. Just incredible. So maybe one day a little bit of justice will happen for Marla and other victims of terrorism who are suing Iran. Well, the case winds its way through the courts, and justice keeps prevailing, at least in written rulings, if not in reality. But according to this report by Stuart Bell in the National Post, the Iranian government is outraged at Canadian courts, saying, and I quote, "The move by the Canadian government contradicts claims about the normalization of relations between the two countries and compensation for the extremist policies of the country's former government." That's referring to Stephen Harper. That's the Iranians referring to Harper. Iran's state-controlled media quoted their foreign ministry saying, and I quote, "Any normalization in the two countries' diplomatic ties requires a radical revision of the extremist and wrong politics of the former Canadian government, such as the violation of Iran's judicial immunity." In other words, Iran wants to continue to be able to support terrorist groups, but with all the diplomatic immunity of a normal country. They're actually calling Canada extremist. But why the outburst now? I mean, this lawsuit has been going on since 2002 in the United States and since 2012 in Canada. So why now? Well, because Stéphane Dion has begun negotiations to reopen full diplomatic relations with Iran. And that had been restricted under Stephen Harper. That's what the Iranians were complaining about there. So this is classic Iranian negotiation style. You saw it by how masterfully they handled Barack Obama. Iran knew Obama wanted the deal more than they did. It was his legacy. So every time Obama would make a concession to Iran, they would take a harder line, not inch towards him. They would inch backwards. Every time he moved towards them, in the end, they took almost everything, moving backwards, making it harder and harder. They gave almost nothing, and it wasn't even a signed treaty in the end. It was all a handshake deal. That's how Iran operates. Well, if you think Obama and John Kerry are awful at negotiating and asserting themselves, well, remember who Stéphane Dion is. He couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. Remember this?
Stéphane, we didn't get it done. We didn't get it done, and we have to get it done, and we have to understand.
This is unfair.
We didn't get it done.
This is unfair. You don't know what to speak about. Do you think it's easy to make priorities?
Yeah, that guy. The guy who made Michael Ignatieff look charismatic. Now, if you think I'm being mean, here, watch Stéphane Dion's awful performance just a few weeks ago when the Chinese foreign minister came to Ottawa and had a joint press conference with Dion. And when a Canadian reporter dared to ask a question of this Chinese foreign minister that wasn't total flattery, the Chinese minister, representing a repressive dictatorship, lashed out at the journalist for even daring to ask a question. Now, dictator's going to dictate, I get that, but Stéphane Dion just stood there, smiling, not saying a word. Here, remember this?
Why is Canada pursuing closer ties with China? How do you plan to use that relationship to improve human rights and security in the region? And did you specifically raise the case of the Garretts during your discussions with the foreign minister today?
I want to make a response to the questions asked by this journalist about China. I have to say that your question is full of prejudice and against China and arrogance, where I don't know where that come from. And this is totally unacceptable.
So, yeah, Iran knows exactly who they're dealing with. Stéphane Dion, he stood by while a dictator berated Canadians for using freedom of the press. Stéphane Dion makes John Kerry and Obama look like Churchill and Roosevelt. But it's not just Stéphane Dion who loves every dictator he sees. Of course, it's Justin Trudeau. Remember what Trudeau said he likes best about China, their dictatorship, not their culture or language or history or architecture or food or even their people. Justin Trudeau said he likes, quote, their basic dictatorship. Remember this?
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime.
Yeah, well, it's just as bad with Iran. Here, remember when Trudeau announced his foreign policy advisor when he was running for leader? His brother. Well, just a reminder of who Alexandre Trudeau is, his brother, his foreign policy advisor. Alexandre Trudeau made a film. He's a filmmaker. He has made propaganda films for Iran, for the government. This film, which makes Iran's case against the West, was produced by Press TV. That's the state-controlled news agency there. Justin Trudeau's brother is a paid propagandist for Iran. And Trudeau hired his brother as his senior policy advisor on foreign affairs. And now Trudeau and Dion are negotiating renewed diplomatic ties with Iran. So what do you think? Who do you think Stéphane Dion's going to side with? Our independent, rule-based courts? A victim of terrorism? Canadian values? Or the dictatorship of Iran that supports terrorism? How much longer do you think Trudeau will keep Iran on our state terrorism list? What chance do you think there is that Marla Bennett's family will actually collect their judgment against Iranian assets here? Well, maybe Iran can pay Alexandre Trudeau to make another propaganda film about how awesome they are and about how Marla was just asking for it. Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of The Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.